What if I told you that deep thinking is not just for the elites, but for everyone?
The glory and the blind spot. We live in an age where few words shine as brightly or receive as little criticism as democracy. It is the anthem of modern civilization, the badge of progress, and the default ideal of nearly every government that seeks legitimacy in the eyes of its people. To question democracy in many circles is to commit a kind of intellectual heresy, as if one has cast doubt on freedom itself. We build monuments to it. We fight wars in its name. We mark our ballots and teach our children that democracy is not just a system, but the system, the best we've ever had, the one that sets us apart from the ignorance and tyranny of the past. And yet, beneath all the reverence, all the parades and campaign slogans, there lingers a forgotten truth. A truth that many of history's greatest thinkers, especially the ones who lived when democracy first emerged, tried desperately to warn us about. What if democracy, in its pure form, contains within it the seeds of its own collapse? What if, far from being a flawless mechanism of freedom, it is simply the most elegant form of organized ignorance, a system that flatters our instincts while quietly undermining our judgment? To find these uncomfortable questions, we have to turn away from the cheering crowds of modern rallies and walk back, over 2,000 years, into the stone streets of ancient Athens, where a very different kind of conversation was taking place. Because, oddly enough, while democracy may have been born there, so too was philosophy. And if we listen closely to the voices of those early philosophers, we find not celebration, but something closer to suspicion, or even fear. The ancient city of Athens, that symbol we see in schoolbooks and tourist brochures, was not just the birthplace of democratic ideals, it was also the place where Socrates, one of the most revered thinkers in human history, lived and died. And Socrates, unlike our modern leaders, was not at all impressed by the idea of letting just anyone make the most important decisions in society. His was a voice not of the majority, but of wisdom. And his warnings about democracy, its fragility, its temptations, its tendency to fall for charisma over competence, have never felt more urgent than they do today. The ship and the storm. Socratic wisdom. Socrates had a way of cutting through the noise of public opinion. He didn't lecture from podiums or issue manifestos. Instead, he walked the streets of Athens asking questions, dangerous questions. He made people think, and in doing so, he made them uncomfortable. Among the many thought experiments he posed, one in particular stands out, an analogy so simple and so powerful that it still echoes across centuries. Imagine, Socrates said, that you're preparing to set sail across the sea, a long journey, perhaps dangerous, requiring skill and judgment. Now ask yourself, who should be in charge of the ship? Should the role of captain be determined by a vote from all the passengers, regardless of whether they know anything about tides, winds, or navigation? Should the sailor with the best smile win? Or the one who promises the smoothest ride? Or should you trust someone trained, someone who has studied the sea, who understands storms and steering and sacrifice? The answer seems obvious. And yet, Socrates pointed out, this is exactly what we do in politics. We assume that everyone is equally qualified to choose a leader simply because they were born into a certain society or reached a certain age. We allow popularity to masquerade as merit. We let voices rise not because they are wise, but because they are loud, and we call it freedom. For Socrates, this was not just a technical error, it was a moral one. Voting, he believed, was not a casual privilege. It was a skill, and like any skill, it had to be learned. Just as we wouldn't allow a person to practice medicine without training or pilot a plane without certification, we shouldn't allow someone to influence the direction of a nation without understanding what leadership even means. But here's the dangerous part. Most people, even today, don't like being told that they are unqualified. Socrates wasn't attacking the right to speak or participate. He was attacking the idea that democracy should be unconditional, that wisdom didn't matter as long as you had a voice. And in the very city that gave birth to democracy, this idea was not welcomed with applause. It was met with fear, resentment, and eventually punishment. Because when you tell people that their opinions need refining, they often don't refine their opinions. They just get rid of you, voting as a skill, not a right. In our modern world, the act of voting is treated like a ritual, sacred, unquestionable, almost divine. We cast our ballots with pride, believing that this moment of decision-making places us at the very heart of a democratic miracle. But what if we've misunderstood the nature of that act? What if voting is not a right in the way we think of rights, something we're born with unconditionally, but rather, as Socrates suggested, a responsibility, one that demands thought, care, and education? Imagine walking into a hospital and declaring, "I have a right to perform surgery," or stepping into a courtroom and insisting on your right to serve as a judge without any legal training. We would laugh or worry, because we know that some decisions carry too much weight to be made in ignorance. Yet, when it comes to electing a leader, shaping laws, or guiding the future of a nation, we rarely ask whether voters have been prepared for the task. We assume that being alive, being of age, or simply being a citizen is enough. This, Socrates warned, is not democracy. It is mob rule in disguise. To him, the solution was not to strip people of power, but to prepare them for it. He envisioned a society where political participation required mental training, much like military service demands physical readiness, where philosophy, ethics, and logic were part of the education of every future voter, where we understood not just what we were voting for, but why it mattered. He wanted voters who could distinguish between persuasion and manipulation, between truth and spin, between a sweet lie and a bitter truth. Today, however, we rarely equip citizens with such tools. We teach them how to pass tests, use smartphones, and navigate careers, but not how to navigate political complexity, resist emotional manipulation, or critically assess a candidate's character. The result is what Socrates feared most: a democracy without discernment, a society where choices are made not on the basis of reason, but on the waves of feeling, fear, and fashion. It's not that people are incapable of wise choices, it's that we've stopped expecting them to make wise choices, and worse, we've stopped helping them learn how. In a strange way, modern democracies have come to romanticize raw opinion. We no longer ask whether an idea is informed, only whether it is loud. We see this in social media debates, in political campaigns reduced to hashtags and sound bites, and in the growing obsession with charisma over character. Socrates saw this coming. He feared a future where elections would be decided by charm, where truth would lose to performance, and where democracy would become a stage. Not a forum for the wise, but a theater for the flattering, the dramatic, and the dishonest. And the saddest part, he didn't just fear it, he lived it. The trial of Socrates, democracy's shadow. In the year 399 BCE, the city that gave birth to democracy made a decision that would haunt the history of philosophy forever. It put Socrates on trial. The charges? Corrupting the youth and impiety, vague accusations designed to silence a man who had dared to question the way things were. But everyone in Athens knew the deeper reason. Socrates was dangerous not because of what he taught, but because of what he revealed, that the average citizen, the politician, even the priest, might not know what they were talking about. He exposed pretense. He embarrassed the powerful. He didn't offer easy answers. And in a world where image had become more important than introspection, that made him a threat. The trial wasn't held in secret. It wasn't the work of a tyrant behind closed doors. It was carried out by a jury of 500 citizens, the very people democracy was built to empower. They listened, they debated, and then, by a narrow margin, they sentenced Socrates to death. Democracy had turned on its most honest critic, not because he was evil, but because he refused to play along. He could have escaped. He could have fled the city and saved his life. But Socrates didn't run. He believed that how one dies is as important as how one lives. And so, surrounded by friends, he drank the poison hemlock and became a martyr not just for philosophy, but for intellectual honesty. It's tempting to think of Socrates' death as an ancient tragedy, something that could never happen in our more enlightened times. But look closer. Today, the death might not be physical. It might not come from poison. Instead, it arrives as cancellation, mockery, or political exile. The philosopher, the whistleblower, the reformer, all can be pushed out of public life simply for refusing to flatter the crowd. Socrates' trial wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom, a warning that even the most celebrated form of government can silence truth when truth becomes inconvenient. And so we are left with a bitter paradox. The society that invented free speech executed the man who best embodied it. Democracy versus demagoguery. The sweet shop owner and the doctor. In today's world, the rise of populism has drawn sharp parallels to one of Socrates' most striking critiques of democracy. He warned that without careful thought and education, democracy can quickly descend into the chaos of demagoguery, where leaders who promise easy solutions and indulgent pleasures, much like a sweet shop owner, deceive the masses into making choices that may ultimately harm them. Socrates' sweet shop owner analogy, which compares a leader who offers instant gratification to the irresponsible politician who caters to people's basest desires, resonates now more than ever. Imagine the election season where candidates vie for votes. One is like a sweet shop owner presenting a menu of easy promises, free things, immediate benefits, and dazzling plans that require no hard work or sacrifice. The other is like a doctor, offering solutions that are less palatable, requiring discipline, delayed gratification, and personal responsibility. The doctor's solutions might be uncomfortable, even painful at times, but they are necessary for long-term health and well-being. Now imagine the voter's reaction. The sweet shop owner, with his enticing offers and soothing words, is far more appealing. People gravitate toward what feels good in the moment, not realizing that the doctor's prescription, though hard to swallow, is the only one that will actually cure their ailments and set them on the path to a sustainable future. This tension between the sweet shop owner and the doctor highlights a dangerous pattern in modern politics, where demagoguery thrives. Demagoguery, according to Socrates, is the art of exploiting the masses' desire for comfort and ease. It's the artificial charm of populist leaders who promise solutions to complex problems that offer no real substance. They know how to manipulate emotions, craft appealing narratives, and promise what voters want to hear. Just like the sweet shop owner, they sell what's immediately gratifying, offering comfort instead of hard truths. But the doctor, the leader who speaks plainly, who insists on the hard but necessary choices, and who offers real solutions, is often pushed aside in favor of the populist figure who promises to make everything easier, more convenient. The voters, seduced by the sweet shop owner's offers, are often unaware of the long-term consequences of their decisions. This is where the danger of demagoguery lies. The allure of immediate pleasure and ease can lead societies down a dangerous path, neglecting the real work of governance in favor of shallow promises. Socrates' analysis was clear. When the doctor is drowned out by the sweet shop owner, society may face dire consequences, just as Athens did when it became swayed by the charisma of populist figures like Alcibiades, who led them to disastrous decisions in war. In today's context, the rise of populist leaders, often charismatic and quick to offer simple solutions to complex issues, has echoes of Socrates' warning. These leaders, like the sweet shop owner, often fail to address the real problems that need careful, nuanced solutions. Instead, they offer quick fixes, easy answers, and simplistic promises that only serve to mask the deeper issues that require more thoughtful leadership. This tension between democracy and demagoguery is critical to understanding the challenges we face today. True democracy, Socrates argued, must be informed by wisdom and understanding, not just the pandering to popular desires. For democracy to thrive, it requires a citizenry that is not swayed by empty promises, but is instead able to engage critically with the challenges of governance. In essence, education becomes the antidote to demagoguery, allowing voters to distinguish between those who offer real solutions and those who merely provide temporary relief, at the cost of long-term stability. The next time you hear a politician promising utopian dreams, free lunches, or an effortless path to prosperity, remember the sweet shop owner. It might feel sweet in the moment, but the cost of those sweet promises can often be a bitter reality for the future. Socrates was right. Democracy demands a careful balance between the easy answers and the hard truths, and the only way to navigate this balance is through wisdom and intellectual engagement. Without these, we risk falling into the very trap of demagoguery that Socrates foresaw, a trap that ultimately undermines the foundation of true democratic governance. Athenian warnings, modern consequences. From ancient Athens to the present day, one lesson rings clear. Charisma often trumps character. The example of Alcibiades, the ambitious Athenian politician, serves as a cautionary tale for today's political landscape. A wealthy and charming figure, Alcibiades manipulated his way through Athenian politics, capitalizing on his allure and persuasive skills rather than genuine leadership qualities. His influence was felt most during Athens' disastrous military campaign in Sicily, where his tactics led the city-state into chaos. Fast forward to today, and we can see a striking similarity in many modern politicians. The rise of celebrity politicians, driven by social media and sound bites, often overshadows true substance. Charisma and flashy promises frequently win over voters, while critical thinking and deep understanding are sacrificed. Just as Alcibiades once used his charm to sway the masses, today's political figures, regardless of their qualifications, often gain power through personal appeal rather than the wisdom required to govern effectively. The result is a democracy vulnerable to the same type of demagoguery that Socrates warned about. The forgotten layer. Intellectual democracy. What if democracy isn't just about voting on popular opinions or majority rule? Socrates' critique of Athenian democracy wasn't about excluding the common person from the political process. It was about questioning the very wisdom of allowing people to vote without understanding the complexities of governance. Socrates argued that democracy must go beyond the superficialities of majority opinion. It should instead embrace an intellectual democracy where informed, thoughtful decision-making is valued. In today's world, we often treat democracy as a simple numbers game, where the loudest voices and most powerful factions dominate. But Socrates' vision suggested that wisdom, not popularity, should guide democratic processes. Imagine a model where citizens aren't just allowed to vote. They are encouraged to engage in deep, intellectual training that allows them to understand the implications of their choices. A wisdom-based democracy would ensure that those casting their votes have not only access to information but the critical skills to discern the truth from the misleading. The modern dilemma: freedom without depth. In today's democratic societies, freedom is cherished as a fundamental right, but without the foundation of philosophical literacy, it can lead to superficial freedoms, freedom without depth, context, or understanding. Without the tools to critically engage with the world around us, individuals are often swayed by empty promises, sound bites, or populist rhetoric. This dilemma is heightened by the decline of philosophical education in many places. As the complexities of human existence, politics, and society are reduced to catchy phrases, individuals are left unable to think deeply about the true meaning and implications of their actions. Democracy, instead of being a thoughtful exchange of ideas, becomes a chaotic contest for attention, driven by the loudest and most simplistic voices. Socrates warned of this very outcome. When shallow freedom dominates, the integrity of democracy suffers. True freedom is not the freedom to do whatever one desires, but the freedom to engage in meaningful choices grounded in knowledge, reason, and wisdom. Education, not elitism. One of the common misunderstandings of Socrates' stance on democracy is the notion that he was anti-people or elitist. This couldn't be further from the truth. Socrates wasn't advocating for a small, educated elite to rule over the masses. Instead, he emphasized the importance of education for all. Socrates believed that the problem wasn't that the people were unworthy of participation in democracy. It was that they hadn't been properly educated to make thoughtful, reasoned decisions. In Socrates' view, education was the great equalizer. He didn't want to exclude anyone from political life. Rather, he wanted to ensure that every citizen had the intellectual tools necessary to contribute meaningfully to democratic processes. His idea of democracy was one where every individual, regardless of their background, could gain wisdom and understanding through education. Socrates sought a society where all individuals were empowered with the ability to think critically, question assumptions, and make informed decisions, rather than being vulnerable to manipulation by demagogues or charismatic leaders. This vision of education, rather than elitism, was at the heart of his democratic ideals. Conclusion: can democracy save itself? As we reflect on the lessons from Socrates and the challenges facing modern democracy, one pressing question arises: can democracy save itself from the forces that threaten its integrity? If Socrates' warnings about the dangers of ignorance and shallow freedom were true in ancient Athens, are they not equally relevant today? We live in a world where information is more accessible than ever before, yet meaningful engagement and intellectual discourse are often replaced by sensationalism and populist rhetoric. The key to democracy's survival lies in the ability to reframe its purpose, not as a system of majority rule alone, but as a deliberative, informed, and thoughtful process. If we want to strengthen democracy, we must return to Socrates' vision of intellectual democracy, a democracy that values wisdom, education, and critical thought above mere popularity or charisma. By fostering a culture where every citizen is encouraged to philosophical thinking, we can ensure that democracy remains a force for good, capable of navigating the complexities of modern society. Ultimately, democracy's future depends on its ability to evolve and adapt, not just in terms of who gets to vote, but in terms of how we engage with the very ideas that shape our political systems. If we take seriously Socrates' challenge and invest in philosophical literacy, we might just have a chance at reinvigorating democracy for the 21st century.